the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What was behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Conditions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Yo, 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 hello, hello, hello. Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Getting Ish Done with I, Dr. Thunder, hitting you weekly, Wednesdays at, it's usually around 9:30 Eastern Time. How's it going, Dr. Thunder?
I'm all right. How are you doing, man?
I'm not doing bad at all. I'm not doing bad at all. Apologize for any weird audio or any weird visuals. Yes, that's my style of art, Dr. Thunder. I like it. Don't judge me. Don't come for me, okay? It's nice. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue the conversation which we started last week. Okay, we're talking about culture and wealth. Is there something that could be said about the culture of a group that makes it such that they attract wealth? A culture that attracts wealth and a culture that repels wealth, if you will. But before we got there, because we're talking about FBA, Foundation of Black Americans, ADOS, or Black Americans, as just said, right? Talking about blacks, and we're talking about black culture. Is it amenable to wealth? Because when we see the wealth gap between blacks and, let's say, they compare with whites or Asians or something like that, there are all kinds of explanatory stories that are given, causal stories that are given. And we spent a majority of the first show yesterday, did we not? Or not yesterday, last week, talking about, well, it's not, well, let's talk about slavery and Jim Crow and redlining and other, systemic racism and whatnot. And let's say, yes, those are factors, 100%. Perhaps they're being overblown with regards to their causal power, but those are factors 100%. But there's some other factors that we can talk about, and those perhaps we have more agency with, we have more control of. We can talk about things that perhaps have to do with the behavior of the groups or the individuals. Is there something they can learn in that regard? And then with regards to culture, right? Because that's how we got to the culture point, is to say, hey, let's remove all those other factors. Let's talk about culture. You mentioned a couple of things, Dr. Thunder, which I think I remember, and that it boiled down to the, shall we say, prioritizing of swag over substance. That's what you called it, right? And this obviously would make men not particularly productive. Let's say if it's a culture of men that prioritize swag, which is the opposite of production, let's say productivity, over substance, then that'll be a problem, right? So, and then you talked also about the families, right? And that they're broken families. And then we said, oh well, is it just the case that African American culture says break up families? And then you say, well, perhaps it has to do with mate selection, and this mate selection is again about swag over substance, and that the women perhaps are not choosing right and then leaving, all that type of stuff. And that's kind of where we were at while reviewing this video. Am I more or less correct there, Dr. Thunder, with regards to what we did last week?
We're in the ballpark. We're in the ballpark.
Okay. So it was a conversation with Coleman Hughes and Dr. Glenn Lowry that we were reviewing after all. But first of all, go ahead and click that like button, click the subscribe button, share the stream. It's going to be another fire conversation where for the next hour and a half, we're going to be exploring now deeply this idea of the culture that you have, and if it attracts wealth or repels wealth. Is there something you can do about it? Is the question in and of itself racist? Which is one thing that we talked about, right? Is it kind of racist to talk about culture? But let us continue with the video and we'll react
So there's such a thing as culture. It's by definition harder to study because you can't put culture in a beaker. You can't measure it. Many of the qualities that we refer to as culture are immeasurable. We're talking about attitudes towards education, what kinds of ideas you're exposed to growing up, the types of uh, the kinds of cultural scripts that you fall into, the kind of social status games that you are taught to play, the rubric you're given for what it means to live a good life and to live a life as an authentic such and such, whatever you happen to be. These are very, very difficult issues, and there is a bias not to study them to the point where Orlando Patterson, Harvard sociologist who's done a lot of work on culture, jokingly calls it the C word to indicate that sociologists treat it as if it's a taboo or off limits. So, when it comes to Black culture, there are some ways, I think, to measure it. So if you just, I cite this Nielsen data in my piece, which is Nielsen, they're just counting, they're tracking consumer behavior. It's for market research. They're counting the degree to which people in different ethnic groups buy luxury cars, buy fancy jewelry. And they find that Black people on average buy more in both of those categories. Not conditional on wealth or income, just period, which is, I mean, you could say it's shocking, but on the other hand, when Dave Chappelle writes jokes about it, or Chris Rock writes jokes about how, Black guys love like rims with, their rims in their cars, somehow everyone in the room is laughing. So there's clearly a recognition, even on the part of Black people, that this is so. When I live in Harlem, just last night I was walking down to get some, get something from the deli, and there's like, a group of 20 Black kids, probably my age. All of them have jewelry and they're dressed in expensive clothes. And I would bet my life that they're not wealthy enough to justify necessarily having those clothes. And it's not a comment on it's not necessarily a comment on their intrinsic worth as people. They seem like perfectly good people. They were perfectly, perfectly harmless. But why would we assume that it's the case that groups with entirely different histories, entirely different cultural values, would nevertheless behave exactly the same? And there's one, so for example, in politics, we know that Black people vote at a much higher level than Asians and Hispanics, like by 10 or 20 percentage points. Clearly, that's not a wealth thing. It's not like Black people have more money and therefore more time to go vote. It's just Black people have at this moment in America, a much more political culture, probably having to do with the legacy of the civil rights movement or whatnot. We can admit that and say, well, yeah, that's not structural, that's just cultural. But why would politics be the only region where that's true? That would make no sense whatsoever. So I cite that data. I cite more data talking about financial habits, the degree to which you're, being prudent with your finances. And what they find is even holding education constant, Asians have a better financial health score than whites, who have a better one than Hispanics, who have a better one than Blacks. And there's also Nielsen data, talking about how many hours of TV are watched on the typical in the typical household by race, and it's Blacks are the highest, higher than Hispanics and whites. So what am I supposed to do? Ignore these facts, pretend they're not relevant? So what I say to frame this is, we don't have to necessarily be talking about disparities or.
It's interesting. Some of the stuff that he's mentioning is agnostic. How much TV you watch is not necessarily an indication of productivity or lack of productivity. It's what you watch that is the issue, right? So, most of my, so for instance, stuff like reality TV shows, Housewives of Atlanta or whatever, or shows like that where they're salacious in nature. Well, it's phony, but it's salacious in nature. It's not, imparting any wisdom other than to encourage you that stay away from those kind of women. But it seems that that message isn't transferred that well either. Because dudes keep messing with those kind of women, and that's part of our issue. That behavior is rewarded, right? But it's what you watch, it's what you watch. It's a little bit like eating fast food. So, yeah, generally speaking, fast food is worse for you than home cooked meal or eating at a nice restaurant, all of that kind of stuff. But the problem with fast food is that it's so convenient that people just eat anything that they want on the menu. So fast food or not, it's kind of, that's sort of agnostic if you're tracking. It's what it is. It's what you do when you get in there. And in our community, that's it's not that it isn't known and understood that there's an issue there, that you still need to be responsible for your choices. It doesn't matter how convenient something is, how accessible it is, but you still have to make good decisions. It's not just that. It's, we know better and still do what it is that we shouldn't do. And that is based on a culture full of people, of examples of people doing that. It's like everybody is doing that. The comment that he made about the rims, those rims are agnostic. Again, if you get rims or you don't. I would argue that getting a nice set of rims, if you have a car that warrants it, is not necessarily a bad thing. But when you're
let me okay, I'm being generous to him here, and it's really not a point worth making. But if you're coming for him as using these examples to build the case that these are the things that lead it after he's not very neatly doing that yet, because so far he's just establishing, well, how does one go about seeing culture, measuring it, its existence, right? But so far, he's then saying certain things that would lead you to that he's saying that, oh, those are the ones that lead to the bad thing I'm talking about. But really, what I gather from this segment of what he's saying, what he professed to be saying right now, is I'm going to show you some examples of, well, look at these things are unique to these cultures. We can see it. These people do this. These people do this. These people. He started out with the voting, for example, right? But he's already kind of hinting of perhaps showing his hand as to the examples he thinks are bad. But he actually hasn't said those examples yet. Right?
Yeah, but I'm not necessarily criticizing him, and I do think that he's made good points, and those are indicators. But they're really, but them on the surface is not the problem. It's not the the fact that it's rims, or that it's watching more TV, or that it's eating at fast food restaurants more, whatever. I'm just throwing that in as bonus. It's not that. It's what is causing that. It's like the modeling of that. And even when you find yourself in, if you find yourself in Babylon, That does not necessarily mean that you're going to automatically be a heathen or buy into what the general stuff is, right? You don't have to be a Babylonian, in Babylon, right? You can.
I wanted to come to this point that you're talking about right here, because when he was saying the young people, right? He went outside. He lives in Harlem or wherever he lives, and there's young people out there with the jewelry and the nice clothes. And Glenn is smiling and thinking, he's like, yeah, I know that scene, and you probably know that scene too, and I know that scene. It's like, of course the black people are going to look the freshest, right? What you're saying came to mind, right? In terms of, okay, if these are the indicators that you're pointing at, you're going to have an issue making the link. But I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that when he gets there to draw the link. But whether he's making that point yet or not, as you said, what I did think was, you know what? I bet, how about those Persian guys, right? How about the Middle Eastern guys? Somehow they could afford it though. Or, no. I think that there's a cultural aspect, is what I'm saying. Let me not get. There's a cultural aspect to the Persians that will make them put on the gold chain or whatever, and the cologne or whatever it may be. And the cologne may be expensive, so may the gold chain, and may they not be able to justify, be able to afford it at that point. Working at the 7-Eleven, right? But still, they do it. And you're saying
that's racist.
And you're pointing out correctly that it's not this stuff, but the reason why they do it. So you're saying, look, if what you guys do is you guys wear this particular white cloth in your culture, and it's an expensive piece of white cloth, that's one thing. But if you're putting on bling because you're fundamentally covering up the fact that if you get what I'm saying, if that is what the culture holds high in your example of swag over substance, or if you're covering up some other kind of deficiency, if it's just trying to prove that you haven't gotten over that hump of poor people, once they have something they have to display, if it's coming from a broken place, is that what you mean by it's what's causing it? In the sense that, look, you can watch TV, you can have rims, this person could do this, person could do that. You're not going to be able to draw a direct line of causality or correlation between chains and bad financial decisions.
Right. Yeah, it's that. It is it might be a little more nuanced than that, or so you can it's like I'm saying, like, I could go into a Subway. I'm talking about the restaurant Subway, which you eat fresh, and that if you go to a Subway, there are more healthy options at Subway than like at McDonald's. Okay. Now I could say, you know what? I'm kicking fast food. The only fast food place I'm going to go to is Subway. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because I want to try to eat more healthy. But if when I go into Subway, I get a 12-inch meatball sub and load it up with everything possible, that can actually end up being worse than if I just kept eating at McDonald's. Right? So it's not the restaurant that is the problem. It's the mentality that even when I went to Subway that has a lot more healthy options, I still go for the garbage. That's like our issue. It's like we're programmed to go for the garbage no matter how good the situation is. So, you have all of these opportunities for upward mobility, and often is the case, even when Black folks get themselves out of a certain scenario, they still feel this allegiance to still prove that they're Black by engaging in dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's like, so you can't, until you deal with that, until you address that, the other stuff is just topical stuff.
You know what? That's
yeah. Go ahead.
I saw this other point you were making, and then as you ended it there, it ended up still going back to the first point you made about the values, really, because okay, and he mentioned it too as some kind of indication of culture is that type of presentation, self-presentation that you present that makes you authentic within the group, right? What is it that makes you authentic, right? Keeping it real. What makes you a real, whatever, right? And then that, I think, is the difference between, because you can say it's not, because it seems to be that what makes you real, what cuts across it all is a certain kind of ratchetness, a certain kind of dysfunction. It's not, oh, real nigga, oh yeah, you wear nice things and you do this and then you do that. It's like, if it was just that, or these topical things, or like you have rims, or it's like, no, it's the underlying undertone of ratchet behavior, or what people these days tend to call antisocial behavior. I think Kevin Samuels always used to talk about, the black culture being one of antisocial, and that's a heavy sociological term because people kind of hear it in many different ways. But really, all it means is there is some kind of a system out there that you feel very much not part of, and you always feel like you're bucking against the system. And it's not so strange that black culture would have that, right? That they will have that kind of down with the system, down with the man. I'm gonna keep it real, right? Isn't that where that keep it real, or is that a justification, or at least not a justification, an explanation of where that comes from? That the outside world is against me, so F it, right?
Well, yeah, I mean that's an aspect of it. The keeping it real is, it's no matter, no matter what the wise choice would be, you buck the wise choice for the choice that seems to, bolster your claims of being, a real nigga. You'll double down for that rather than, making the better choice, the wise choice, the healthy choice, as it were. And it's a taste. And I think about this too. It's a taste thing. Like you can cultivate a taste for stuff that's bad for you, and it can just become really hard to get that taste out of your mouth.
See, Dr. Thunder, we're talking in a particular realm where there's not a lot of current idioms, memes, systems of understanding, or even places that study or take these things seriously anymore. What do I mean by that? You're talking about taste. We're talking about culture. We're talking about values, and not in some kind of dry way of cataloging possible values or this, that, the other. But we're saying that this is relevant and it's important. It's an important issue, right? That it is the underlying cause of X, Y, and Z. So from you're in academia, you probably talk to people whom, what is your idea of the level of discourse when it comes to using these types of arcane terms? Like you're talking about taste. People will be like, oh, you're just we got way past that, after material dialectic and all that kind of stuff. Like, what do you mean the taste? It's about, people are taking this, it's some systemic blah, blah, blah. You're just talking some Victorian era. What do you mean the people need to, we need to take them to finish in school and teach them good taste to be like the white man? Now I'm being tongue in cheek, but that there's some real intellectual somewhere who would say some version of what I said right now, right?
So a sort of underpinning, an underpinning of this conversation, the conversation that they're having, in more particular, the conversation we're having here on those topics you just discussed, is multiculturalism, right? So in academia, they've fully embraced the whole multiculturalism thing. And so when you start talking about taste, if you evaluate the taste, as soon as you evaluate the taste, as you say, hey, I don't know that taste that you have for cheeseburgers is as good as this other person's taste for salmon. I think the taste for salmon might be better than the taste for cheeseburgers. As soon as you do that, then nobody wants to touch it. Because it seems like you're making a value call. You're creating a hierarchy, and they don't want a hierarchy in that sense. Multiculturalism wants no hierarchy, wants everything to be seen on the same plane. So taste, culture, all those things that you listed, they're they're part of. You can, on a topical level, you can say, hey, I went to this restaurant and I got this kind of food. You can talk. You can talk on the very surface level of it, but as soon as you want to actually make some judgments about long-term consequences, that's when you're done. The conversation's over.
Yeah, and the comment here by Todd with regards to other people who may give this excuse is true. It is correct, because I can turn around and look at Africa and at certain aspects of African culture or the lack thereof, right? And then say, look, this is the reason why you're having problems, right? And a lot of, this is the reason why you have leaders who are mercenaries and all that crap about, oh, it's the leaders. That's what some Africans say. It's like, no, it's the people, it's the culture, it's the thing. And it's some ism, it's a tribalism, is this, is that. Yes, well, those are kind of good descriptions of what's going on. And the truth is, a lot of this, the typical ways in which nations get formed. And I'm sorry for going on this tangent here, but we are, after all, talking about something which is at the root of a fundamental intellectual discord right now between what you would call, this is called multiculturalism on that side, multiculturalism, relativism. Let's not evaluate things. Let's not create hierarchies. Let's keep things blah blah blah, right? Versus the need perhaps to evaluate things, right? That separation. I think that it is a deep topic. Hence, one could bring up such things as well. The way that societies naturally form is that some strong group, tribe, individual, whatever, is going to subdue some other people, or there's going to be some kind of situation where there was an offer that you could not refuse that was given. Like, we need to follow them, or they conquered us and we're followed, whatever it is. And as a result, what comes with that is going to be eventually a moral code, okay? And that's going to keep the people from being silly mercenaries, like, and have an idea of an identity, like, let's say, a Nigerian identity, which, for example, doesn't really exist. It's more just all these crazy tribes doing their stuff. The reason I'm mentioning that is that moral code, that thing that people are saying, oh, it's nothing, is the beginning of any of the culture that these quote-unquote multiculturalists wish to, shall we say, celebrate. So you want to celebrate culture, right? Or you want to celebrate very many cultures, but you're denying the existence of culture, right? And here's something that I don't mind in this regard, okay? I don't mind somebody, and I'm sure that there are those out there. I don't mind what, to use a term by like Dr. K. I'm sure there's always high-level people in any group. So the high-level people in this multicultural place, okay? And by high level, I don't mean intelligence. Typically you get intelligence helps, but by high level, I mean the person.
Animal.
Pardon me?
You mean political animals?
Interesting. That's a good way to put it. Let me say, I would like to hear a little bit more about that kind of that nomenclature. But the people whom we say, look, okay, there is I get it, but I understand that cultures exist. Okay, here are my reasons for not wanting to make these evaluations for touch or for, I'm going to make a demarcation. Like, yes, I'm going to be able to judge cultures. I understand that cultures exist. I know that these affinities between people, these bonds, yes, they do exist. But I understand how they're kind of dangerous, and I wish to police and manage them. And I'm policing them and managing them on different levels. So if you and I, Ike, this person would say, want to talk on an esoteric level about the actual existence of culture, then we can talk. However, I find it dangerous to let people start doing these kinds of judgments because people are low level. People are cows, they're sheep. Next thing you know, they'll start killing each other, Ike. So it's not that I'm being intellectually inconsistent. I get it, but I'm playing high level manipulation, Ike. So is this the same type of political animal? Is that what a political animal is?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest version of a political animal is it's just a person that is very much interested in politics. So they see politics as their primary means by which to get everything that they want, right? So, and how that's different from someone that's not a political animal is that person will tend to think that stuff like skills and saving money, those are going to be their primary ways to accomplish what it is that they want. And a small percentage of people will have a high enough skill set, enough intelligence to be able to acquire the things that they want. But most people that have acquired huge wealth and generational wealth and all of that, they're political animals. I mean, absolutely. They know how to play the system. They know how to apply leverage, when to apply it. They have an extensive network. They know people. They know people that know people. That's all politics.
You
know,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, say what you're gonna say.
So I see that I'll call it. You're talking. The chessboard I see that you're talking about is what some people tend to call the political economy. There's a political economy everywhere. For example, there's a political economy in jail, and it has to do with shot callers and packs of noodles and ho-hos and whatever, and candy and commissary and cigarettes, right? And people do all kinds of things within there, and there's rules and this and that. So that whole political economy, where there's an end to being pursued, typically like an economic end, something, sharing of money. There's a political economy in the department, in a college department, for example. There's a certain amount of money. There's positions. There's this, that. There's this politicking. So that political economy stuff there, I 100%. I see what you're laying there, but you don't give any credence to somebody that says that it is actually dangerous. Like what the intellectual pushback that I gave when I was playing this high level multiculturalist. I said, look, Dr. Thunder, I'm not just playing political animal stuff. Okay, it's not about the money for me or whatever. But and I do agree that cultures do exist. Okay, I'm not playing. I'm not going to play these games with you. I'm not going to be a sophist with you. However, I know that it is a powder keg. If I let these people go back to making their evaluations and their judgments, it would be great, Dr. Thunder, if it was you and people just like you that were out there going around making these judgments. But people cannot be trusted with, grouping up, tribalism, and making these judgments. Now, obviously, I'm going to need to make my case, but as a broad outline of my case, so this person would say, is this not important to you? Is this completely crazy that I say that people cannot be trusted with these tribal instincts of judging other people's tastes and such? Am I crazy?
I think it's good to I think it's healthy skepticism. However, the real problem with the multiculturalism thing is not the multiple cultures. It's that they're telling you don't evaluate this on a hierarchy, when behind the scenes, this small number of folks that are actually controlling this thing, they absolutely are measuring everything on a hierarchy and have selected which features of which cultures will be promoted and accepted and put forward. Right. So that's the sort of insidious, nefarious, that's the part that is, see and I suspect that this is true. That very same principle is true even with people that consider themselves to be moral relativists. No, they have a morality, and they have a morality that they're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to tell you that, that morality is relative.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I mean. And I'm saying that the reason I'm going to tell you that morality is relative is because outside of myself is because, okay, it is at the end of the day a question of power. I don't like what I think will happen if I let the people, if I allow the people to make free moral judgments. That is a way of characterizing what they're doing, right? They have their own, like, let's just talk about the behind the curtains. So the behind the curtains people, they have an idea of, no, if we put this on top, let's say they're being actually charitable, and it's not just some kind of I want to put my group on top type stuff, right? It's like, okay, I think that if we promote these aspects of this culture, right, these are best for peace, right? So they have chosen a hierarchy, and then they're telling you not to, and you just don't like that. I don't either. But what I'm saying ultimately is, at least I would like to talk to somebody that is at that level with their honesty, right?
Good luck.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying, and that's what I mean by like the high level people. So, because for me, a high level people, like, for example, let's say Jacques Derrida, for example, the person whom all these people are quoting, right? He was a high level person. You can go read his book, and he'll tell you exactly why he doesn't trust people, or why the system has to work out this way, or why things have to kind of Foucault, or all these people who always talk about power and power controls everything, or you, anyways, not to keep on harping on this, because we'll play a little bit more of the video here. Or you could read Nietzsche and to see why his, kind of look, I can't judge everybody. I can't judge Einstein the way I judge everybody. I can't judge you the way I judge everybody. What was right for Jesus to do was, like it was right for Jesus to tell the Pharisees and these people and all that kind of stuff and flip the whole, and do all that stuff. But was it right for some other crazy madman to do it? Do we want any crazy madman coming out flipping our traditions, every 10 years, right? I know that is kind of extreme, especially to pick Jesus as that kind of stuff, right? To kind of say.
I totally take your point. I get it.
Okay, let's continue playing here.
Or racial disparities in outcome. In fact, I think that whole conversation is less useful than many people seem to think it is. It's not obvious that talking about gaps is a really useful framework for improving outcomes for people, rather than just talking about, making things better for those on the bottom in a race blind way. But if we are going to talk about outcomes, if we're going to talk about racial disparities, then let's talk about racial disparities in inputs as well, in order to be intellectually honest.
Yeah, that last is a really significant observation. I think I want to come back to it. I want to talk about culture for a minute. I appreciate the things that you had to say, and I find myself personally very positively disposed toward your way of looking at the world here. And then we'll come back to talking about why are we talking about gaps, because I think that's really important. So about culture, it seems to me there are a number of questions. What is it? So we need a definitional thing. What are we talking about? And I think that's not easy territory. I think there's some real subtleties there. But let's suppose that we can agree. I mean, I know what the common sense, you're talking about norms, values, practices, things that people value, institutions that, structure families, how peer groups talk about who's a hero and who's a villain, and many other things besides, not to put words into your mouth. But yes, culture, we could have a discussion about where does it come from? So this is about the causality issue and about the extent to which cultural differences might be a reflection of oppression and dispossession and plunder and historical discrimination. And then, does it really matter? Why does it matter? How can we fix it?
I did think about this sneaking move here where, where we started from, right? They started from the systemic things where they were saying, look, whatever wealth gap you have between the blacks and any other group is because of slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, and so on and so forth. And then you're saying, but, how about culture? And then we finally get to culture. And you know what they're going to do, Dr. Thunder? The culture is a result of slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, blah, blah. You saw it.
Yeah. Quote unquote, can we fix
it? Anyways.
So all these kind of issues come up. So I just want to put that on the table. We're going to be talking about culture. We need to be clear on what we're talking about. We need to be cognizant of the historical and sort of complex dynamics that produce cultural variation. And we need to be explicit about how it is that we think it matters for outcomes that we care about. I'm not saying you haven't done any of this. I'm just sort of laying this as a landscape. Now, and then I want to talk about, why are we talking about gas, but I want to put that off. Now, in terms of some of the examples that you gave, so spending patterns, blacks disproportionately investing in visible luxury goods like automobiles and clothing and things like that relative to whites. And this, of course, is going to have an implication for wealth because if people are spending their surplus money on that, they're not saving it and having it accumulate over time. You are aware, are you not, of the study by, you mentioned University of Chicago data. I'm not sure if you were referring to Kerwin Charles and John Gurian. They have an article in the economics scholarly literature on conspicuous consumption and race. And they start by using their data to document exactly what you said, which is there's a higher expenditure by blacks on luxury goods, and they were controlling for income. And if it's true without controlling for income, that's extraordinary since blacks have lower income. But in any case, it's not inconsistent with what you said. But they then go on to make the following argument. And I'm talking about where does cultural variation come from? That's what I'm addressing myself to. Now, they go on to make the following argument.
Here it comes.
The reason why people will perhaps spend on luxury visible goods is they want to signal that they are relatively successful in comparison to their peers. So who are their peers? So if you're black and you live in an urban area, your peers are other blacks in urban areas. How would you signal? Now, you could put your money into a stock portfolio, but no one could see that. You could also put your money into a B&W high-end vehicle and people could see that. If you want to be marked as a successful person by onlookers, and you are, in terms of your basic presentation, a member of a group that's not very successful, the way you signal that is by visible luxury consumption. And then they go on to say, that can account for the racial differences because we see the very same behavior among whites. They take data comparing whites in the northeast of the US, where whites on the whole are relatively prosperous, to whites in the south of the United States, where whites on the whole are less prosperous. And they find that the whites in the south spend more controlling for income on visible luxury goods, consumption goods, than do whites in the northeast, consistent with their theory that the underlying cause of the variation has to do with the desire of a relatively successful person who can afford it, but who belongs to a group that is on the whole not so successful, to be marked publicly as a success. Now, that took me longer to say than I wish it had taken. The point I'm trying to make is that I've observed the racial difference, in this case, in expenditure patterns, but I haven't identified a racial phenomenon. What I've identified is a phenomenon that happens to have a racial manifestation, but has a universal root.
Okay, so not a racial phenomenon, a class phenomenon, perhaps a money phenomenon again. Do you buy this? It's a poor culture thing, not necessarily a black culture thing. Hence, wherever you find poor people, you'll find this thing. Part of why I'm not fully buying it, and you just let me know why, is because of the subtleties you kind of described earlier, which is that all through, and I think regardless of class, all through the culture, the idea of what that authentic, real nigga is not, it's a little antisocial at best, let's say. So it's not just a question of that poor people, there's a poor person version of a real one, and then there's a rich person version of a real one. I think, no, it's the same all through with regards to Black culture. I'm not a Black culture expert. What do you think about this? It's a poor culture thing and whatnot.
So yes, but I think that the reason that it's a poor culture thing, oh man, so there's like a character thing in there somewhere, right? And it's akin to the point I was making earlier about if you go to so say you have the same access, but when you go into that restaurant, that Subway, and your stated purpose was to go in there was to better yourself by eating cleaner. But because of the taste that you have, you choose the foot long meatball sub, which, you know, is probably worse for you than what you could have ate somewhere else, right? So the issue is disproportionately, I'd say, yes, this affects poor people, but poor people still have access to information. So it's not like you can say, okay, because you're poor, I give you a pass. No, you know, and remember, and poor is a relative term too. The poor among us are not what the poor in the past used to be, right? The poor among us still have essentially the same access to information, right? So there's a character issue. So if the reason that you are spending more money on luxury goods is because you so desire to signal to other people that you made it, right? That seems to be a character flaw, right? I mean, there's a lot of language in the Bible about that.
Now, why would you, in calling it a character flaw, I could say tomato, tomato. I said this is poor culture, and I showed data, right? You said character flaw, and I'm like, okay, call it a banana if you want. Still, the data suggests that it's concentrated over here where the poor is, right? So now what?
Yeah, so maybe it's in this scenario, it's a distinction without a difference, right? So it doesn't create a different what it is that I'm saying, that it, you know, doesn't create a different outcome, but it might be a way to understand what's actually happening with the on the granular level, what's actually causing this. It's not just
okay. So when you say granular and causing, so it's granular and what is to be done, right? That is why, that's typically always a good reason for, if you've changed the word of something, change the focus, the value, where you're like, okay, it's not some neutral poor culture value, it's a character thing. Then you're like, okay, well, one good reason to do that is because here's my pill for character, right? If I want to not have diagnosed it properly, then I can have the panacea, if you will, the cure. You know, if I know causally, as you're saying, on the granular level, then perhaps I can do something about it. That is the only place this conversation should be going, right? So then now, Dr. Thunder, where is your character pill? Where's your character panacea? Because the people, at least, whom say it's a poor culture thing, they can come through with government programs and a better education, this or that and the other. But the culture people, okay,
Yeah.
have a tough battle here, because where is your system for creating a better culture? Kaiserian Empire here is talking about Africa too, which I also kind of hinted at with regards to the political culture there and the mercenary culture there and all that kind of stuff. It's like, well, where's your culture pill for this particular person in the hood that is involved in conspicuous spending?
I mean, it's such a rough thing. I mean, I think on the individual level basis, you have to get yourself around people that are not affected by those aspects of culture. And I think that's one of the reasons why, not just, and people say, education is the key. Well, really what the key is getting yourself around people that I guess that have been educated, or that have this other wisdom and these other character, qualities that you lack. Right. And so that's on the individual level. But the reason why people don't usually do that, it's not as much because they don't have access to those people. Those people are probably all around them at some level, but they've been trained to see those people as lame.
Okay, so someone seems to have summarized it here to say it's that exposure, right, is your pill. Exposure and practice. Exposure to what? Exposure to certain types of people. Very virtue ethics like, in the sense that, and I like virtue ethics, by the way. What I mean by that is, for anyone who maybe wondering what the hell is he talking about. In other words, good people, what's a good man? Well, a good man is what a good man does, and everybody knows what a good man is. And you want your people to be good, you put them around good men. Stop asking questions as to where does good come from. Good sometimes is quite obvious. Not everything is a subtle hypothetical ethics, situation. Those hypothetical situations, like if two of you are in an island and there's one canoe, and it's like, dude, like that's not what we mean by that's not what people are doing to call good or bad every day, right? Coming up with that right decision in those hypothetical ethical situations. Hence, we know what a good man is, right, without thinking too much about it. And so exposure. But you're saying that the people that you want to expose these people to are lame. Okay, so how do you extricate this lame virus, the virus that blocks the view of the person, right? You're trying to show this guy in the hood that's overspending. You're trying to show him Carlton. He thinks Carlton is lame. So you have to remove the Carlton is lame glasses from this guy. How does one do that before you get to the level of exposure and all that kind of stuff? Now, let me even try to tackle the question, because I know it's a how does one go around and remove this? It seems like it's something that you cannot remove. You simply have to wash away by exposure to more and more Carltons, right? And also on the other hand, people need to be held responsible for the negative consequences of the other type of behavior, right? So it's like, there's Carlton. I'm going to keep on exposing you to Carlton culturally and in the magazines and with this, that, and the other. But on the other end, if you keep doing this stupid stuff, I'm not going to bail you out. And there's the prison industrial complex also waiting for you if you take it further than just typical keeping a real poor behavior, right? And hence, it is your typical kind of law and order type of solution. Law and order on one end, good examples and preaching of good taste on the other end, with Boy Scouts and nice cul-de-sacs for everybody. Okay, so it's what Professor Emmy Wax likes to call middle class values, right? And she's hated for that, obviously, because you say values and you say middle class, and it sounds like white values is what people tend to hear. It sounds classist, racist, and all kinds of ists, and it also sounds not exciting enough as a solution, right? For people, I don't know what you think about that. Like, do you think how much of this is just people don't like it because it's just too bland? It's like, oh, you mean what we gotta do is
Absolutely, that's 100% of it, man. Because usually the real answer to something is something really boring, and something that it's going to take a lot of discipline over a long time to really see the results of. See, and so no, that's not sexy. That's that's not the hotness. That's not it's lame. It's and that's a big issue. I think one of the reasons why you have also a disproportionate. I mean, I was at a gas station earlier today, was heading to the gym, getting a couple drinks, got something for my son, and then we got back in the car. But we were standing in a line, and this woman in front of us, black lady, she's buying a bunch of lottery tickets, scratch off things and like this, and it just got me thinking, who disproportionately purchases those things? It's not rich people.
Racist.
It's not upper middle class people, right? It's it's people that want to hit the home run, and it's because that's more exciting, than doing what it is that they likely could have been doing all along. Stop buying a bunch of junk that you don't need. Start saving your money. Do a bunch of boring stuff. Don't be so concerned about your outward appearance to people. That biblical principle about what's done in secret, God will reward in the open. And what you do for man, to be praised by men, God's not so much into that. And it also reminds me of that. What is it? Frank Lucas? Is it Frank Lucas? Was that the gangster?
Yeah. Yeah.
And his saying, the loudest one is the weakest one. And what he was talking about there is, they were making a lot of money, and he had a bunch, he would tell the cats that don't be, wearing all your money, in your clothing and in gold chains and all that kind of stuff. And he was also doing that telling them that because he didn't want people to become targeted by the FBI, to know that they must be doing illegal stuff if they have all this bling, right? But the loudest one is the weakest one. If it's necessary for you to wear your money because it's so important for you to be able to show somebody else that you got, that you made it, that you're something. And, we used to call it peacocking too, right? And in doing that for the sake of, attracting women and stuff. And it's like, okay, well, if you're peacocking when you met them, guess what your life is going to be trying to keep them?
Word them up, word them up, word them up. That is a struggle I had. Now, the reason why I call it a struggle is I'm almost a person of multiple personalities. It's one simple personality for some, once you know me, but it's the performer side. So a lot when I'm socializing, sometimes I'm also I get in the performer mode, or I was actually there to perform, right? And that's where people saw me, right? So in the past, I had issues kind of balancing that side with then my real self, which is, I'm a complete recluse, shut in, leave me alone, don't talk to me. But anyways, let's continue with the video here. I think that the points that have been made so far are good points. And this last point that was just made was that, people don't want to face the simple solution. Your simple exposure pill, right? Exposure pill, which solves the bad character problem on the individual level, what you call the bad culture problem on the group level, that it's too simple. It's like law and order and, Carlton, and it's lame. And even you think Carlton is lame. So that's, there's something objectively lame and boring about all these things, right? So let's not pretend like they're completely out of their minds. It's like your vegetables, right? That you got to eat, or whatever it is. Those 1,000 other things that are of this sort, right? Of this exact character that you have to do, but that are kind of lame. But let us continue here.
And one could manufacture. I can manufacture examples of this kind ad infinitum. The structure of all of these examples. Let me give an extreme one: violence, murder, homicide. There is a huge racial disparity. It's on the order of magnitude in the incidence of violence and the incidence of homicide. What could be more a reflection of cultural difference than that? Of differences between subgroups within the United States and how much they value life, and the extent to which they can exert impulse control, in the internalized prohibition that they feel about inflicting harm upon other people. What could be more of a kind of rooted cultural phenomenon than behavior of that kind? So an observer might say. On the other hand, a more subtle and deeply thinking observer might notice that the motives for committing acts of violence are complex. So, for example, retaliation. When does retaliation? Preemption. I took the act of violence before the person acted against me, this kind of thing, okay? Strategic phenomena. So if I know that the likelihood that a homicide is going to actually be solved is 0.2 and not 0.9, and I'm in a situation where someone threatens me, I have to think that they might commit homicide against me because the likelihood that they will be caught is low. But if I can commit homicide against them first and prevent them from committing homicide against me, the likelihood that I'll be caught is low. This thing creates an environment where maybe I want to go ahead and commit this act of homicide. This could be a systematic behavioral pattern within a relatively isolated community, like the high school dropout, unemployed, African-American, west side of Chicago resident, who maybe...
You can always, he's going on, and he doesn't buy any of what he's saying, but anyways.
He knows 5,000 people. His whole universe consists of this interlocked structure of social relations amongst people relatively like himself. And I find that there's super high rates of violence in this population. And I attribute it to a, quote, cultural phenomenon. Do you see what I'm getting at, Coleman? I'm trying to say, what is culture and what does variation in culture across population subgroups depend upon? And to what extent can I make a mistake of essentializing, of attributing it to something I'm calling Black culture, when in fact, it's a much more finely grained and...
I got to say something here. So there is and I get what he's saying. There's a distinction between stuff that is specific to Black culture because it's Black, and given the particular history, I think you can't separate those two things, and phenomena that you can find in other cultures that are being produced by the same sort of factors. So, for instance, single motherism in our community is totally ridiculous, and I think is something that we can point to as the cause of most of our issues, most of our primary issues. The breakdown of the family. To the extent that the white community experiences single motherism at the same rate as Black folks would do. And this is an argument that I have made frequently, and that is what you see in the Black community now that's coming for the white community too. As those statistics increase. So I would, so there's a fine distinction. Now, but here's the thing with respect to the way the data works. That stuff doesn't really matter in that disproportionately the people disproportionately the black people are poor, right? So that's, you know, so if it's because they're poor or if it's because they're black, it's still happening to them, right? And yeah, we can argue about, is it because they're poor or is it because they're black? And yeah, I suppose we can parse out some nuance, but this thing has been set up to disproportionately disenfranchise black people, right? So it's not by mistake. It's not a mistake. You know, nobody that was orchestrating this thing is surprised that black people are where they are, right? Disproportionately poor, right?
Who are they?
So,
Who are they, Dr. Standard? Because, you know, it is right.
Are you asking who are the people that are?
Yeah. Or do you know the people whom are orchestrating? You're saying it is not. You're saying the fact that it is disproportionately affecting African Americans is by design, and the people whom planned it are not surprised. Whom are these people? Or do you know? Is there an address, a general way of getting to them?
Was it the Bilderberg group? Isn't it the Bilderberg group? No. Okay, so I don't think that it is. Okay, so you know, the filthy rich folks, they don't, you know, the only color they see is green, you know. So to the extent that the current system optimizes their cash flow, they will prop up, support politicians, policy, you know, and, you know, and everything else that will keep it that way. You gain something by having, by having poor people because of this factor that they spend so much money on luxury items.
Okay, but the black part, you're gonna, you know, I'm not gonna hold your feet to the fire on that one about.
Well, yeah, but understand. Okay, I mean, and I don't want to go. I don't want to have to keep going back to this, but I will state, obviously, we know that there was state sanctioned terror against the black financial institutions. Okay, so, and that's not an imagination. We know that actually did happen. And we know that the way that the policies are, which were disproportionately weaponized against black communities, that encouraged our women to choose the government over choosing the father of their baby. Okay, and we know how that has sort of spilled out. Now, once you're here, though, it seems to me that those that are particularly wealthy stand to gain a lot by keeping it the same way that it is. Right? It seems to me that there's more money to be made with all of these class distinctions and racial distinctions and who tends to be poor. And I think you make money that way.
Interesting. Now, obviously, one of the things that Glenn Lowry is focusing on here is the science, if you will, or to the degree to which it could be scientific and not, you know, that's a silly word to actually use. the degree to which you can be discreet. That's why, he's talking about essentializing. If you take out the political aspects of essentialism and essentializing, it's, well, when can I create a concept, an essence of, and call it culture and make it neat and distinct enough from these other things around it, such that I'm not just hand waving when I say something, right? Because otherwise, why do I have this word and am I using it if it can just be, disappear and appear amorphously and such? So I think that's an interesting point. And what you talk about, let's say single parenthood and whatnot, and the fact that the Black community may be a spearhead, but it's coming for everyone else, is something else that one needs to think about too, in the sense that there's this thing. I always like to say things like this, like, well, someone has to be at the bottom, right? Let's say, or someone has to be the spearhead, let's say in this case. And that is relevant to this in beyond just saying, okay, someone has to be the spearhead. So Black people, there's nothing particularly wrong with Black people. This is something that's going to happen to the whole of America, and they just happen to be first, right? When you're first, or if you're bottom, in this case, it's a bottom thing to be first, right? There are at least two ways to be there. There's one way where it's just the system, or what, someone has to be last, but we're all elite warriors here, but someone has to be the least talented out of all of us. That kind of thing, right? Well, we're all holding our own, but someone has to be last, right? That's one way to be it. Another way is, they're keeping you down, or another way is, and it's just a way of me talking about, again, and circling back to the culture thing, is something that is within your control, perhaps, right? And say, why am I at the bottom? Yes, I could talk about the people keeping me down, or the system, or blah, blah, blah. Well, ideally, you want to be in that situation where you're like, hey, I'm at the bottom because someone has to be at the bottom, but we're all holding our own here. If I'm making any sense, Dr. Thunder.
Yeah, no, you're making sense. One thing that it seems that the powers that be, I mean, how come white folks don't have leaders? How come it's just Black folks?
It's a feature. It's interesting. It's a political culture, right? That Mr. Hughes mentioned earlier, right? That's saying that Black people vote. He was using that as an indicator, but I think that generally speaking, a politicized a culture that is into being led and politicking, right? It's like there would be the person for example, at the job, right? I'm not saying that Black people do this. I'm not just taking it out of the national context into political animals. I would say that it seems the case is that part of Black culture is to be a political animal, right? And hence to always be looking for political problems and political solutions to problems. Hence goes the thesis that they don't tend to focus on the economics over, right? You get the picture, right? That, for example, even a culture. And I think this is an interesting one because you talk about the swag over substance thing, and then we went into the tastes and other types of things. But I think that this aspect of economics over politics, or the reverse, politics over economics, I think can be a powerful one that could overcome, because let's say you're that guy who likes the rims too, right? And this is a different culture now that you like the rims and you like the cologne and the gold chains and whatnot. But your culture says economics over politics, right? So you don't focus on political solutions or political agitations, or focus so much on the political roots of your problems. You simply just try to economics your way out of it. That could override all the other, taste aspects of your culture, right? You could be a total Philistine, if you will, taste-wise and culturally. And you focus on economics, and you'll still end up being a Philistine, but you'll be a Philistine with money, right? Like you'll have no culture. But at least you won't be saddling us with debt or whatever. I don't know. What are your thoughts about the economics over politics? And because you did mention the leader thing, and I think that it's a feature of that.
Yeah. So Yeah, yeah. Ultimately, having resources that can become its own politic. So you have the benefit of the resources, but you also have the power that the resources gives you, which is, it's in no uncertain terms, we're talking about influencing people. It's politics. So that seems better than uh, having to just play politics all the time. The black the black community, leader thing, where are the black leaders? Where are the black leaders? We're the only community that allow anybody to talk to us about where our leaders are. Because like I said before, you don't talk about who are the Asian leaders, who are the white leaders. Cats don't talk about that because it's totally ridiculous to talk about that. And we should also see it as being ridiculous, right? I don't need a leader. I don't need a leader. That's not what I need. I have no need of a person to tell me what to do or to make me feel emboldened, by some rah-rah speech that they give me. I don't need that. That's not what I need. I need the system to be conducive to the kinds of interests that I have.
Isn't it conducive already? And is that part truly settled? That I know we've circled back to the beginning of the argument now. Is it true? There's the part of the system being conducive, level playing field, and whatnot. Is that part settled enough now where we could truly just focus on this cultural aspect, the taste aspect, the character aspect, and talk about the boring pills?
Yeah. So. Okay. I this is a bit of a digression.
Let's shout out our super chat.
Yeah. Shout out to Falcon Black, Blizzak.
Falcon. Yeah, you over here talking about not wanting, like, you don't need a black leader and all that kind of stuff, and you're crushing the hopes and dreams of the black British leader, Falcon Black himself, out there dropping 20 pounds, which is over $20, definitely supporting level, but he styles himself the leader of the black British people. So I guess, he'll have to come convince you to join. But anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so but we were talking about good, what it is to be good, and being a good person and all of that. And Glenn mentioned something about common sense, and then he started to sort of walk down what it was that is generally meant by that. And I've made this point frequently, and that is that there is a difference between common sense and good sense. And I think there was a time when things weren't so affected by what am I saying? Not new age, but what am I saying?
Something going on that's modern.
Yeah, modernism. It's not modernism. It's it's the well, things weren't so into the whole relativism. We weren't so influenced by that in the way that our society is in general. I mean, consider the fact that right now one of the primary debates is on what is a woman, in that people will not answer the question directly, right? Things have sort of become such a lack of a willingness to pin things down so that one will not have to be held accountable to what it is that they just pinned down, right? There's a lot of that's happening. And so you really can't expect people to have any kind of common sense. As you do that, you're systematically eliminating the sort of the pillars, the landmarks, the ways that we can navigate and tell where we are. You're systematically eliminating those things, so you're getting away from. You're getting you're doing everything possible to get away from the possibility of there being any sort of common sense. So now it becomes so necessary, though he used the term common sense, but then he also had to define what it was that he meant by common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then therefore we know that there is no common sense. There is no common sense. And
quite just a simple definitionally, if you will, because you're talking about something that is common, some kind of common, reasonable pattern, and commonality has been thrown out the water along with the relativism that you alluded to, and defended by the multiculturalists that you. Go ahead.
Or maybe to be more nuanced about this, there is a common sense, but it's just not good sense.
Yeah, right. That was the first thing you said. We were basically was common sense versus good sense, which is there's always a common
right.
Yeah. So conventional. There's always conventional wisdom. It could just be stupid. It could be conventional foolishness.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So, anyways, let's play a little bit more of this. And again, ladies and gentlemen, we are trying to tackle the idea of culture and taste, trying to talk about character and values and how this would be attractive to wealth or repulsive to wealth. How could you attract wealth with this, or how could it, how is there a correlation between these groups and their culture and the fact that they're represented in some particular slot in the wealth Olympics, if you will, right? And I think that we've unearthed a few things, both on the political/economic side of, the whole thing of, focus on economics rather than politics, but also on the swag over substance deal, which we touched on. And that one is where there's a lot of subtlety in terms of, it has to do with things such as the taste and whatnot. And when somebody's talking about it, it sounds like, oh, you want people to sit around, sip tea, and listen to Mozart or something. And which I would say, well, that's not a bad thing, or whatever equivalent of that is, if you want
that's
something a little bit more Afrocentric.
Yeah,
exactly.
What you're going to do after the show tonight, but yeah.
It helps. I think because I'm sit, listen to Mozart. It helps relax me and make more money.
hey.
Yeah, or whatever Afrocentric variation that you decide that you want to go there, or you know what, I prefer Scandinavian music, whatever. I think that part maybe we'll talk a little bit more about, because I see this we're probably going to do a third part on this. But I think that the subtle stuff, which is something I highlighted about 40 minutes ago in this conversation, that how one is able to seriously talk about this stuff where there's no common sense, right? And I use the term idioms, right? You don't have common language, common guardrails and goalposts for talking about how to judge good taste, because to judge good taste is not in good taste anymore, right? It's not in good taste to say of this culture or this particular attribute of a particular food that is not in good taste, right? That it's so there's no common language for that. other than what the orthodoxy has decided. They're behind the curtain hierarchy, as you mentioned earlier, which has a totally different mechanism behind it. But the reason why I like to go behind the curtain, by the way, is because sometimes I like to. It's that whole, let's see if you can construct, like, if you were a philosopher king, what would you construct? Not that philosopher kingship is your ideal form of government, whomever I may be asking this, right? But how would you deal with the masses? Because that's always the issue. Okay, how would you deal with the non-philosopher kings amongst you? But let's play a little bit more of this and see.
And specifiable consequence of, yes, structural implication. I'm not trying to let anybody off the hook. I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not Ta-Nehisi Coates making excuses for the thing. I'm saying we have to be very disciplined in how it is that we talk about it when we're invoking these cultural. What's your response to that?
I completely agree. So what you're doing right now, which is good, and you're thinking like a subtle social scientist, which is what you are. You're thinking about like how far do I zoom in the microscope so that I can talk about what's under the lens in a coherent way without being grossly misleading or without missing big pieces of variation in the data. Why not do that with the racial wealth gap to begin, though? This is what I'm saying. When the statistic we're trying to explain is just a broad black versus white, this is black wealth, this is white wealth, look how different they are, then I'm forced to talk about the inputs at the same scale. If I want to push back, I can't just start talking about this subgroup of black men between 18 and 25, which might be a more interesting conversation.
That's a fair point, and I think we'll stop there. He's pushing back, saying, "Hey, you're making me do like this crazy social scientist stuff of when can I essentialize, where can I create this entity, this concept, and discreetly enough called culture without mixing it with other things, blah blah blah." Meanwhile, I'm just trying to respond to a gross data such as a gap between these economic gap, wealth gap between these broad populations, right? But this leads me to the last question I'm going to ask, perhaps a little tongue-in-cheek, and then we'll land the plane, which is, what is the wealth gap between blondes and non-blondes? Do you know, Dr. Thunder?
I could tell you what my sense of it is. It wouldn't be based on any. It wouldn't
be based on any data. What is the wealth gap between blondes and non-blondes? What is the discrimination? How many blondes get into Harvard versus don't get into Harvard? My point is, my point is, look, maybe there's some alternate universe where blonde versus non-blonde is the thing, right? That's how we've decided to group ourselves, demarcate ourselves, and that's therefore the data we're going to decide to collect. That's the way in which we're going to flex on each other and compare, right? The pointing out the absurdity of the blonde thing is to, in a way, point out the absurdity of the entire project of comparison, right? Which is, hey, we need to chill a little bit with regards to some of this comparison, right? Part of that is an optimistic point of view. The best version of this, what I'm saying, is an optimistic point of view that says, look, everyone is on their own pace. Not to hell, as you were saying, where black people are leading the road to hell, right? But that they will catch up, and there's no need. Let's not stop with the comparison. Plus, maybe some ways of comparison, like in other words, the ways in which you're slicing the cake misses the whole way in which reality is actually stratified. You should have moved your knife this way and then that way, right? But how would you know? You're just taking data like a dumb human, this and this and this compared with that, and all those types of subtleties could be said, right? And why don't you care about how many blondes get into Harvard versus non-blondes, right? And can't we get to a place, so we would, this kind of hope would say, can we get to a place where it's just like talking about blondes? We're talking about black people now, just like talking about blondes. Like, who cares? I don't know what blondes have, property versus non-blondes. Same thing with blacks. What do you think about that? I have a dream speech.
Yeah. Yeah. I I get that point. I've been watching. I started watching a new series on Netflix. What is it called? What is it? The Anatomy of a Scandal. Anatomy of a Scandal. And it is it's in England. They're all Brits. And so the guy has an affair. He's a politician. He has an affair on his wife for 5 months. And his wife is blonde, but the one that he cheated with is brunette. So then I could put the question back at you. Is it because it's different? Or does he have a certain type, right? So if he had a certain type, then maybe he cheats on his wife with another blonde. But if it's just about something different, then it doesn't matter that his wife was blonde. It just matters that who he cheated with was different.
Interesting studies that could be done. Yeah. So basically, you're saying that in a particular realm of social interaction amongst human beings, yes, hair color. Like if you want to talk about, maybe you should bring it up with Obsidian and research for his next book or something like. You can bring all kinds of colorisms into play.
Yeah. Not just the colorisms that are kept alive by black women.
What's going on Thursday on your show? Thunder's Thoughts. What's scandalous? Scandalous things.
Scandalous, man. Oh, so scandalous. So a couple really cool things are happening. Conversations with Dr. Thunder. I've got an interview that's going to release at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. It's my interview with Alan Obi of We Need to Talk. And we had a really, really great conversation. Black community, dysfunction in relationships, blah, 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 that whole thing. And I thought we got into some areas that are not usual areas for that discussion, which was part of what I think made this quite interesting. And so that was very cool. So that's releasing in the morning. And then tomorrow night's show is going to be this. And I've got BGS Ibmore is going to be my co-host on the show. And, there's been some videos circulating, stuff like, I'm sorry to be crude, but, if she's not, if you go out on a date and she's not putting out, then split the bill. It's a bunch of stuff like that. Or
I've been seeing a lot of memes, a lot of TikToks.
Yeah, a bunch of stuff like that, or stuff like one of the ones is that he flies the woman out, and then now she don't want to do nothing, so now he takes her right back to the airport, and then the surprise is on her because as he's getting her out of the car back at the airport, she's like, "What's my confirmation number?" So what confirmation? I flew you here. You could fly yourself back.
That is quite interesting. You know what? I'm not going to mention many names on this stuff, but this is a year ago or something like that. I met someone in LA, YouTuber, Solo TV84, as a matter of fact. He flew in. And he came in with, there were two lovely ladies, white ladies that came along. And there was an issue, exactly this issue, where Someone got flued in but not flued out, if you will. Or was it flued out but not flued back? Or however the slang is. And it was a whole, it was pretty funny. And someone flipped out in the Uber talking. It was good times. It was a worthwhile.
but here, let me so she broke the social contract. How should Black men respond? And the featured topic or the featured video is going to be one by Dr. Ronald Neal. That's him tearing the figurative contract in half. And so I think that's going to be a great conversation. Like I said, co-host will be BGS Ipmore. And yeah, we'll have the usual simp anthem, which is going to be an Eric Benet tune this time. And then of course, TikTok theater and all of the usual bells and whistles with the.
Does Eric Benet have long hair, long or am I thinking of someone else?
Well, he used to. I don't know that he does anymore.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Back when he was simping,
yeah, right. Well, I think he might still be simping. But the you remember he was married to Halle Berry for.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
But apparently he was some kind of sex addict. And you listen to his lyrics and his songs, it sounds like he's some kind of a sex addict. Actually, the song we're going to look at is Chocolate Legs.
All right.
Yeah, so
that's
something about some panacea, some elixir, that solves all the world's problems when he gets home and his lady wraps her chocolate legs around him. So yeah, we'll be taking an intense look at and pondering the significance of such a lyric.
Well, there you have it. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Go and check it out. Both the interview with Alan Obi,
and then tomorrow night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's Thursday. That's the show where BGS would be my co-host. So that's cool. And of course, you got to come back to Ike's channel this Sunday for Case Closed.
And
Eastern Standard Time. Yep.
And next week for another episode of Getting Ish Done.
That's right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, we are gone. All right, and let's hit him with a little bit of this.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenances falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised. The battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.